When someone begins to question their faith, the last thing church leaders want to do is say the wrong thing or handle it in a way that will further push them away. With so many historical concerns or doctrinal questions, what is a leader supposed to do? I'm happy to report that Leading Saints is here to help with the Questioning Saints Library. This is a full library of 20-plus presentations related to how to minister to an individual who is questioning their faith. We cover topics like how to answer tough questions, maintaining relationships when someone leaves the church, and how to embrace doctrinal ambiguity. If you want to review all the sessions from the Questioning Saints Library at no cost for 14 days, simply go to leadingsaints.org/14. That's leadingsaints.org/14. While you're at it, we'll give you access to all of our virtual libraries that cover several leadership-related topics. So click the link in the show notes or simply visit leadingsaints.org/14. Hey, if you're a newbie to Leading Saints, it's important that you know, what is this Leading Saints thing? Well, Leading Saints is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Latter-day Saints be better prepared to lead. And the way we do that is through content creation. So we have this phenomenal podcast, we have a newsletter, we have virtual conferences, so much more. And articles on our website. I mean, I could go on and on, right? And we encourage you to jump in, check out Leading Saints, go to the search bar at leadingsaints.org and type in some topics and see what pops up. We're just glad you're here to join us. David Snell, Saints Unscripted, in the house. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Kurt?
Good. I'm actually in your, not your house, but this is your house of where you work, right? Yes. Anyways.
Thank you for being here, Kurt.
Thank you.
Pleasure to conduct this interview with you.
Now, for those that may not know, like, what is Saints Unscripted and who are you, and explain this monster before us.
Well, if you don't know who I am, you should really be ashamed of yourself. Just kidding. So Saints Unscripted is primarily a YouTube channel. But we're also on Facebook, and we do some TikToks, and we've got an Instagram account and things like that. But primarily it's a YouTube channel, and I wasn't around when it first started, but it started as it was noticed that YouTube is a pretty terrible place to learn about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
And so they set out to, provide a faithful voice.
And this was like 2016, maybe?
Oh, yeah, probably before that. Probably like 2015, something like that.
Yeah, and that time it was, now there's some great, and I think people figured out, and there's some great resources like yours, but...
Yeah. There's a lot of great stuff.
But back then it was like anti, and then here's another anti. Right?
Yeah. I mean, there are more great creators out there. I'd still say that antagonistic material about our faith is still overwhelming on YouTube. But... So we wanted to kind of provide a relatable, fun Latter-day Saint faithful voice that could kind of talk about. It started out as talking more about cultural quirks and more having fun and just having a fun talk show for young Latter-day Saints to watch on YouTube, which didn't exist at the time, as far as I'm aware. And over time, that has kind of evolved into more of a teaching platform where we're teaching about Latter-day Saint beliefs. It's Saints Unscripted. Our main show is, as per the title, unscripted, and we bring on guests. We just had you on before.
That's right. We just recorded
this.
So stay tuned. Right?
It's going to be good. I pointed to the microphone like people can see me pointing at them. But a couple of years ago, we started another segment of the show, which we just call Faith and Beliefs. And I was asked to be in charge of kind of producing the videos for that. But that is a scripted segment of our show, and that's more dedicated to shorter videos that are more pointed at a certain topic. We really just kind of get down to the nitty-gritty and talk about the facts, talk about the history of different controversies, and questions that people have. It's not all that. Like, we also just get into history and the story of the church and different things. We've got an episode coming out soon about the Deseret alphabet, which I'm super excited for. Cool. It's not really that controversial, but it's really interesting. But, anyway, so today, we've got the main show, Saints Unscripted, where we bring on a lot of great guests and experts in different things that can speak to different aspects of our faith. And then we've also got the Faith and Belief segment, which is usually a little more serious. Well, we try to keep it light as well, but we talk about some heavier stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
and we hope it's a place for younger people. I mean, older people as well, but younger people to come and
I noticed you gestured towards me. I'm just saying. Speaking of gestures.
Speaking of older people, Kurt. But like we want to share the gospel and help people be excited about our faith, whether you're in our faith. When you're in the faith, we want you to feel like you have things to be proud of and
mm-hmm.
excited to talk about. If you're outside our faith, we want you to be able to learn about our faith in a non-threatening environment. If you have questions about our faith, we want you to be able to come and understand our perspective on controversial issues and things like that. But we wanted it to be such that you didn't have to read an academic article to be able to digest the information. Yeah. So
and that's like with the demographic you're focusing on. So that the young adult, is that fair to?
Yep.
A good general classification.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just see the nature of social media and how it works. And of course, like on Sunday, they'll sit on a pew and listen to a 15-20 minute discourse, right? But if they're on social media, Instagram, and a 35-minute devotional at BYU pops up, they're not going to just stop and listen. That maybe where in the 90s, that's sort of all we had. It's like, if I want to get some good, solid doctrinal insight, this is what I'm going to listen to. And so is there maybe explain the method to it all that I think would be interesting for leaders to understand. Is just like, are you looking for short and condensed content that's going to appeal to that, since that's what they're seeing anyways?
Yeah, I we've experimented a lot, I think, in the past with different types of content. We've gone through different segments of the show that have come and gone and have, served their purpose, and we've moved on from them. We had a segment that was called Unofficial Missionaries, which, the idea behind that was there are a lot of people that want to know more about our church and about our faith, but don't necessarily want to meet with the missionaries because that can be kind of a pressure situation. Yeah. And so we had on a couple of hosts that would essentially talk about the missionary lessons, but they were missionaries and you could just learn about it over YouTube and things like that. So we've done several different things, but generally, the main show, our videos are usually around 15-20 minutes. My Faith and Beliefs episodes that Taylor edits, he's another host of our show, Taylor Jorgensen, who's fantastic. Those are usually about 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. I wish they were like 3 minutes, but you can't condense some topics down that much. But when we have, certain guests on that have a lot to say, we'll do longer episodes. I think we've done, some half-hour episodes when you bring on, kind of heavy-hitting scholars talking about tough subjects. Brian Hales, I think we've done some longer episodes with, things like that. So.
Yeah. Do you get any word from like people using this content maybe in the context of a priest quorum or a novice quorum or anything like that? Yeah.
I've gotten a few messages of people like I remember specifically one person snapped a picture during, I think it was elders quorum or Sunday school on Sunday, and they had the white projector screen pulled down and there was, a thumbnail of one of our videos that they were watching during class. Yeah. I know policy-wise, handbook-wise...
we're not endorsing anything, but we won't tell if you do.
It's a little discouraged to use, sources that aren't technically affiliated with the church. But people have used them in that context. Also, I have heard about people using it in like institute classes or seminary classes. Again, I don't know if that's... I'm unorthodox enough that I would just do it.
Yeah. And I think there is I just think like in a priest quorum or young women's class where you're going to maybe talk about some concept that you've covered on Saints Unscripted, and it's like a 3, 5, 6 minute video, and hey, let's just watch this and just good warm up, and your production values, top notch. And they're not meant to be like funny comedy, type thing, but they're entertaining, and there's clips and things that come through that make it really engaging, right? And so it's a good way to maybe warm up a group before you jump into maybe a really tough doctrinal discussion.
Yeah, and I hope that people see that value in it. Taylor, our editor, and I are both huge movie buffs, and so we just have pop culture references littered throughout the Faith and Beliefs videos, especially, and we're put in charge of getting props for our new set that we're using in our studio, so there are little nuggets of pop culture there as well, and hopefully that interests people. I find it entertaining.
Yeah. So just talk to me about because I imagine you keep in the comment section is a dangerous place to wander, but I'm sure you get feedback and you see the comments and things like. Just talk to us about that young adult demographic, because as leaders, sometimes it's like we want to understand them, we want to speak to them, we want to teach them in ways that they are going to be drawn towards the gospel and the doctrines of the gospel. So, I mean, what if you were the expert witness of all things young adult? Like, where would you start with that?
Man, I would say that antagonistic material will find the youth whether they like it or not. It's just like if you're on the internet, if you're on any kind of social media, it's really just almost unavoidable at this point. And we need to be prepared to talk about those things.
Yeah.
Just because the subject is taboo or not talked about traditionally, that's not like when a youth comes to you with a really tough question, saying, "Oh, we don't talk about that," or like a lot of people have questions about temple ordinances, for example.
Oh, yeah.
You can't just say, "Oh, we don't talk about that." That's not resolving any kind of concern. That's not helping that individual, and chances are that they're going to continue to seek an answer. But if members aren't talking about these controversial issues, then antagonists of our faith are the people who are controlling that conversation. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we more dedicated to this tradition of not talking about taboo subjects or sensitive subjects, and letting antagonists talk about that, control that conversation, or are we willing to kind of step across that line and hopefully help our younger people?
And they live in this culture of like information and quote unquote facts. Like they can go to Google and they can find the answer or the fact or the story or whatever. And I was interviewing Clay Olson, who does a lot of work around pornography and about helping the younger generation learn the dangers of pornography. And he mentioned the point that we can't just come to them with this feeling like pornography is bad, it's a sin, avoid it. They actually want the facts, like this is what it's doing to your brain, or this is the ugly side of the exploitation happening behind the scenes. And once they understand this sort of this logical component of the whole discussion, then they'll hear and it's a sin and it's dangerous. They almost need the whole package. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it was, I'm not going to quote him perfectly, but it was a few years ago that President Ballard was talking to, I don't know who the congregation was, but he said something along the lines of, the days have passed when we were able to respond to questions with, have more faith, work on your testimony.
Right?
Yeah, like bearing your testimony. That time has passed, and our youth need something else, and they need good information, I think, is what they need. And I would say that one of the issues that the youth are facing is I think we trust, and this is kind of ironic coming from me, but I think we trust social media influencers way more than we should.
Yeah.
Like we see a TikTok and we're like, oh, well, that answers that, that's the end all be all of this subject. And I think that's really tearing people apart in some ways.
Yeah. This whole influencer dynamic is really interesting. And I think especially leaders who work, or who lead young adults need to really be familiar with it, because it's of course, in an ideal world of the gospel, we think, well, we have 15 great influencers. Like, aren't they great? Well, yeah, conference comes around every 6 months, and that's great, and we should revisit those talks again and again. But like you said, they may hear one influencer sort of give this nuanced sort of first step into confusion of a doctrine or perspective of the church, but then they hear it like an hour later from another one and another one, and then by Sunday they've heard this message over and over again, and so we think, now we're going to straighten them out. It's like, no, we need to make sure we point them towards resources that are other influencers, faith promoting resources like Saints Unscripted, to make sure that they're hearing all sides of this, because they're going to hear it. We can't just say, don't read that, don't follow that account or whatever, because if it's not them, it's the other. Yeah,
we can't just say like, oh, a critic wrote this, therefore you can just ignore it. Right? Yeah. That doesn't always work. You have to get into the details. And one of the things that we do on Saints Unscripted, or specifically the Faith and Beliefs videos that I help produce, we usually, almost always, in the YouTube description, we will include a fire hose of links so that you can go and do your own research, carry this away from, whatever video you're watching, and start doing your own homework. Read, these articles, these scriptures, these conference talks, or whatever it may be, these studies, and so you can come to your own conclusion. Because that's really a challenge, I think, is we don't like doing homework because we like having an answer in 5 seconds or 15 seconds. And because we don't like to do our homework, we don't do our homework, which means that we don't know how to do homework, I think, is what that translates to. And so that's kind of something I'm trying to do, is like when I present a topic, often what you're seeing is just the stuff that I've recently learned. Like I wasn't born with this knowledge about, the priesthood ban and controversial issues like this. Like I had to sit down and study it out and come to my own conclusions. And then what you see on the screen are like my conclusions, and you're kind of seeing the evidence or the result of this homework process. And I want to encourage the youth to learn how to do that and to do that for themselves, because there are so many voices on both sides that are going to want to tell you what to do and what to believe and how to interpret things. It's a really valuable skill to be able to put those voices aside, recognize them, but be able to step away from them and say, what do I think? How do I interpret these things? What conclusions am I coming to based on the evidence that I'm seeing? And I think that's a really valuable skill that we're seeing less and less of, unfortunately.
Yeah. Anything else about the young single or young adult, sometimes single adult demographic that you've learned about, just or are learning about currently, that maybe leaders don't quite understand?
It's a different world than we grew up with, and I think that we need to take them seriously and listen to them, and not with the intent to respond, but with the intent to understand where they're coming from, because these are our future leaders, right? Like we need to make sure that they have a sure foundation, right? Man, I could talk for hours about the dangers of social media and influencers and whatnot. Well,
from your experience with social media, like because I've even wrestled this myself. Like I don't, you see studies out there, and who knows, maybe it's some just influencer telling me what to think, but like just we did not evolve. Our brains are not like wired for the social media experience, but it and you insert your favorite documentary about the dangers of social media. Like it's where the dopamine hits, and like it just keeps drawing you back, right? And so how do you navigate it, and how do you see other young adults do it? Or is it just they're just sucked in? And I mean, you can't stop at a stoplight and not see a passenger in a car that doesn't have a phone out, right?
Well, the advantage is that most people really just hate us, right? As Latter-day Saints. So it's hard for your head to get too big when when a lot of the comments in the comment sections are just beating on you, right? But it's something that we try not to. So talking about views, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the dopamine comes from, gotta get a new viral hit out there.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see many viral videos from Saints Unscripted, and I think that's okay, because I think a lot of virality comes from controversy, but also like contentious controversy. Like people love seeing, Mormon versus devout evangelical debate. The
throwdown of the century.
Yeah. And people love that kind of content. But that's not what we do. And that's, we would probably get more views if we did, but I don't think that that's the audience we're after.
Yeah.
We're looking for, the people who are just sincere seekers of truth, or people that are just genuinely curious about our faith and what it's like to be a Latter-day Saint. And so we don't have a lot of views, but I think that they're really valuable views.
It's almost like that steady voice, right? And I think leaders can fill that role as well, that I may not hear anything remarkable or dynamic from, my good bishop, but that voice and message is always steady. And similar to yours, as I see different topics come up that you cover, it's like, it'll be interesting to see how they break that down or cover it or answer that question, right? And just putting these steady voices out there for these young adults to consider and put up against maybe some of the opposing opinions is really helpful, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think it'd be foolish for a leader not to be aware of Saints Unscripted and the good work you do as these topics come up. Especially in a bishop's office, to whip out a clip and show it.
I think that one of the, and I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, just kind of plugging our show here, but I'm really proud of it. I think that the faith and beliefs videos, which are just kind of have been my baby on the show, it's a really valuable database of a variety of important topics. And they're valuable for new converts who are just trying to learn more about the church. They're valuable for members who have been in the church for a long time that are just learning new things or just hearing about new controversies, which I think happens a lot. They're valuable for missionaries who are receiving questions from investigators about these things, which is going to happen a lot, because most everything that an investigator is going to know about our faith is what they're going to read online or see on TV. And those probably aren't going to be great things, but missionaries aren't trained to respond to those tough questions. They're, lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, basics of the gospel, which is great and essential, and that's what they should be focusing on. But it would be really nice if they, had the background knowledge to be able to respond to, whatever these investigators are throwing out. They're also valuable, these videos, for non-members. If you're doing a book report on Latter-day Saint beliefs, come watch the video. I'm not going to try to, connect you with the missionaries, unless you want to be, of course. I'm not going to try to convert you. I'm not going to try to bash on your beliefs and talk about how wrong you are and how right we are. They're valuable for anyone that has questions about our faith. If bishops are listening to this, or stake presidents, bishops and stake presidents aren't trained to talk about these things. They're not historians. And that by no fault of their own. Like, that's what you get with a lay leadership. But it is so helpful. Like for instance, for me, I don't have all the answers. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but at least I know of some resources that people can turn to be able to come to their own conclusions on things. Like, I might not know a lot of stuff about the restoration of the Melchizedek priesthood, but I know that I can turn you to interpreter journal articles or BYU studies or conference talks that talk about these things, so you can at least get to a starting point on your quest to learn more, right? So I think that it would be really valuable for bishops when people come in struggling with, tithing or whatever it may be, to at least know what resources are out there provided by Saints Unscripted that can respond to these things, as opposed to, I've never been a bishop, but if you're not trained in these things, I hope I would expect there to be maybe some floundering when these questions come up. So yeah, I hope that leadership knows that these videos exist. Yeah, we have a lot of silly videos, on the main show, on the unscripted show, where we just we're shooting the breeze sometimes and playing some different silly games. But we also have some really serious guests on, Royal Skousen, he knows more about the text of the Book of Mormon than anyone on the planet.
Yeah.
Or Brian Hales or Paul Reeve or, all these different scholars that we have on the main show, in addition to the Faith and Beliefs episodes where, we get down to business real fast and we try to be entertaining and have fun, but we're not messing around, we're shooting straight, and we're going to, and the thing is like, if I try to be very conscious as I script those Faith and Beliefs episodes of what counter arguments there might be, or what critics might respond with to these things. I try to preempt those questions so that there's kind of no stone left unturned after the episode is over. That's really hard to do in a quick episode. So, and of course, there's always plenty more to say about each topic, which is why I leave the additional resources in the YouTube description so people can go do their own homework. But yes, we are, some goofy young people talking about Latter-day Saint culture, but we've got some really great resources and some really serious, solid stuff that's out there that I'm proud of, that I hope that can be really helpful to people.
Yeah. I sort of, when people ask this question to me all the time, as far as like, how do you come up with your content? Or, people ask me, how do you find the people you interview or decide? And I'm inside, I'm thinking, well, sometimes I'm just like, you get over here, sit in front of the mic. Like, but I mean, is there a method to your madness as far as like staying up to date with what the questions and concerns or type of videos that would be most helpful to your audience would be?
Yeah. So, the great part about my job is I have a pretty long leash to kind of research and produce videos on whatever I might be interested in at the time. So a lot of them are just based on that. Like they're based on questions that I have, or maybe rumors that I've heard, or claims that I've heard about church history or whatever. And I say, okay, let's sit down, let's do the homework, and the result is the video you see, right? But there are also, that's one of the good things about comment sections, is you can kind of gauge what other people are interested in and what questions they have. So there have been lots of episodes that have come about from YouTube comment sections or Facebook comment sections, where people have said, I'm confused about this. Can you help me with it? Or even people just saying, outright throwing out antagonistic claims. Joseph Smith did this and this and this. And I say, I don't know about that. Okay, I'll sit down and, maybe an episode comes out of it. One great resource is missionaries. We've found that a lot of missionaries are using Faith and Beliefs videos to help prepare them to respond to these kinds of controversial questions. Sometimes they might even, tell their investigator, hey, go look at this video. This talks
cool
about it. But I'll get lots of messages from missionaries saying, hey, this person had this question. Do you have a video on it? And I'll say, oh, no, I don't. Here are some resources. But then I'm also thinking,
yeah, maybe we can do something here.
What about this question? Yeah.
That's cool.
And so sometimes it turns into a video.
Nice.
But, yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Anything as far as like if you're standing in front of a room full of bishops and relief society presidents and stake presidents or whatever, anything else we haven't touched on would be worth exploring? Or
man, I would just encourage them to, again, I don't want to sound too much like I'm patting myself on the back. the more I've been involved in, being an influencer, you
That's
can't
right.
see me doing the air quotes, right? But like, I know that a lot of people, hear, oh, look, another influencer, right? Ugh, what do they know? And I totally get that. Like, I get that, and I don't want to come across as big-headed or like I have all the answers. I'm not like I have a public Facebook page, which I tried to avoid doing for a really long time because I don't feel good about like self-promotion, like, look at my face and look at how much I know, So I don't want to come across that way. I'm hoping to be, redirecting people towards just good resources and ultimately towards Christ, right? But I hope that bishops and other leaders in the church will at least just go on YouTube or go on Facebook, look up Saints Unscripted, or if you are looking specifically for just kind of the quicker, more hard-hitting faith and beliefs videos, we have a Facebook page just called Faith and Beliefs. I think it says Faith and Beliefs, a Saints Unscripted production or something like that. And I would hope and encourage you to just go there and look at what we have. Watch some of the videos, like just look through the titles. If something interests you, watch it and judge for yourself whether or not it's going to be useful to you or not. Because I came home from my mission and I was like, I know everything, right? Like I've been teaching the gospel.
Explored every corner of the doctrine.
Yes. I've been through the depths. And I know how to teach the gospel. But then I came into this world of tough questions and church history, and I just realized I don't know anything, because it's not necessarily normal for your regular member of the church to be diving into the Joseph Smith papers and interpreter journal and all these scholarly things. We generally stick with what we hear at General Conference, the scriptures, maybe Ensign Magazine or Leahona, I guess. I don't know if I changed the name. We stick with, the standard stuff, which is great stuff, but it doesn't always address the things that people are really struggling with today. And so I would hope that leaders would check out our channel, look at what we have, and I think that the ideal scenario, obviously this isn't ideal, but like if somebody comes to you with a question about church history, like my hope is that instead of saying, just read your Book of Mormon more and pray more and, go up to 11% tithing. No, don't do that. But, those are great things, minus the tithing thing. That was a joke. But like, reading and praying and having faith, those are great things. But sometimes we turn to those things because we don't know the answer to their question. And just because you don't know the answer doesn't mean that there isn't an answer. We have a lot of answers. We don't have all the answers, but there are a lot of questions that we have really good answers to. But if you don't know where to go for those answers, then it's a missed opportunity to have a connection with whoever's struggling with that. So if you look at our videos and at least are even just familiar with the topics we cover and just kind of have a mental note of those things, and then somebody comes in and says, hey, Bishop, you know what? I just heard that Joseph Smith married a 14-year-old girl. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? And you think, oh my gosh, I know of a video on that subject. I have a resource that I can throw, to this person that might help. And that's what I'm hoping that our videos can be used for, that they're just resources to help people that are looking to learn more, whether they're struggling with the history or just curious about it or whatever it may be. But we just want to provide people with resources that are going to be accessible and not intimidating or threatening.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to definitely feature the good stuff you're doing, because it can be such a strong resource for those leaders that Just need something. Plus, there's an entertainment value to it. It's not a dry scholarly paper that you have to read through or whatnot, but it's digestible for sure.
Yeah.
So obviously, you can go to YouTube, subscribe. Anywhere else if they want to learn about the work you do.
Yeah. We've got Saints Unscripted on Instagram. We've got Saints Unscripted on Facebook, on TikTok, the Faith and Beliefs page on Facebook. I have, again, my own public page. I think it's just called David Snell Saints Unscripted. Again, I don't necessarily like to promote myself too much, so I just kind of post our videos, and I'll run across really fascinating things from church history that don't make it into a video, so I'll post some of those things sometimes, but I'm happy to chat with people. I'm really quick to respond to messages on there. I love doing that. I love the one-to-one interaction that I get to do. But so if you have questions, you can contact me there. Where else? I think that's probably it.
Yeah. And we'll link to anything else as well in the show notes that if you think of something that that quilting side gig you got.
It's crochet.
Crochet. I'm sorry.
It's crochet. Only grandma's quilt.
That's right. All right, David, the last question I have for you is just reflecting on your time, this journey you've been in creating content and trying to answer tough questions. How has that helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
There's a book by the Hafens, Bruce and Marie Hafen, called Faith is Not Blind.
Love it. It's a great resource.
Yeah, fantastic. Quick read, too. But they outline this process, right, of dealing with tough questions. And the first stage is simplicity, right, where everything's just kind of butterflies and rainbows, and that's oftentimes due to just sheer ignorance, right? They're butterflies and rainbows because we haven't found the, pits and bats and stuff yet. And then the second stage in this process is complexity. So we move from stage 1, simplicity, to stage 2, complexity. And complexity is kind of when that bubble bursts. And your unrealistic expectations from the first stage kind of come crumbling down, and you're in trouble, right? You're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not as certain as I used to be about these things. There's ambiguity. I don't have answers to every question. There's some gray area in this topic, or, the evidence is not unambiguous regarding this bit of church history. And that's a hard place to be. And that's where a lot of people end up leaving our faith, is because they find that complexity and they're like, this is the end of my journey, right? There's nothing past this complexity. And we want to be sensitive and loving to those people who come to that conclusion. But there's a third stage in this process, and it's simplicity beyond complexity. And that's where you deal with the complexity, but it's not the end, and it's not all there is. And you resolve some of the complexities, you learn more throughout that process. Others you just kind of sit with and find other ways of coping with. You form new expectations that are more realistic, but you get to a place where you're comfortable in some of the complexity, right? And that's a really nice place to be, I think. And it has helped me grow closer to Christ, because I think I have a more realistic understanding of who he is and how he operates, right? It's when we're in that first stage of simplicity and somebody tries to throw complexity at us, it can be scary, because we don't know how to respond sometimes, and that can kind of trigger a fight or flight response. Or it can bring out some aggression in us. And that's when we start arguing with people online about religion and things like that. But when you get to this kind of settled simplicity or simplicity beyond complexity, when you get to that stage, it's a lot easier to, I think, interact with people, because you're more confident in your just knowledge of the gospel and gospel principles, and more confident in your faith, just because you're aware of the tough questions. But it has allowed me to better love people and be more of a peacemaker. And that's one of the things I've learned, is that your relationship, in order to be a disciple of Christ, you don't need to have a perfect theology. You don't need to know all the answers to every question. He taught us in the Bible, by this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one for another, right? And so throughout all of these, academic topics and controversies and nuances in history, I feel like I've come to a point where I'm more concerned about loving others than being right. And that brings me closer to Christ. The amount of knowledge I have, which isn't a lot, obviously, I mean, compared to, others, and the more I learn, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. But like the amount of knowledge we have isn't an indicator of the quality of our relationship with Christ. And so throughout all of this, it's just, it has helped me to prioritize some things more than others. And academia is important and useful, but at the end of the day, I always come back to it's more important to love others. I could wield this academic knowledge as a club to beat people with and to Bible bash with people, but I don't think that that's what Christ would want me to do. And it's taken this, journey to get there, but that's sort of where I'm at. And again, that's another thing that I think bishops and other leaders need to know, is that yes, provide answers for people where answers exist. You need to be prepared with those resources, know what they are, but also just love people. That's probably the most important thing you can do. And bishops and stake presidents, they're already great at that, so I'm probably preaching to the choir, but it's something that has been impactful for me.
That concludes this episode of the Leading Saints podcast. We'd love to hear from you about your questions or thoughts or comments. You can either leave a comment on the post related to this episode at leadingsaints.org, or go to leadingsaints.org/contact and send us your perspective or questions. If there's other episodes or topics you'd like to hear on the Leading Saints podcast, go to leadingsaints.org/contact and share with us the information there. And we would love for you to share this with any individual you think this would apply to, especially maybe individuals in your ward council or other leaders that you may know who would really appreciate the perspectives that we discussed. Remember, to access the Questioning Saints library for 14 days, visit leadingsaints.org/14.
It came as a result of the position of leadership which was imposed upon us by the God of heaven, who brought forth a restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the declaration was made concerning the only true and living church upon the face of the earth, we were immediately put in a position of loneliness, the loneliness of leadership, from which we cannot shrink nor run away, and to which we must face up with boldness and courage and ability.